The iron gate swung open with a groan of certainty, and then Tiana Mitchell was moving, not of her own choosing. Ethan's grip locked around her left arm and Dylan's around her right, their polished Oxford shoes striking the marble driveway in practiced unison as they walked her toward the street like she was something that needed to be removed from a surface. Her delivery bag sailed through the air a half-second later, tossed by Jared with the casual indifference of a man discarding junk mail, and landed on the concrete with a dull, heavy thud. Hunter held the gate wide open and did not look at her once. "Welcome to Arden Tells Tales. Hey everyone, please tell us where you're watching from in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. Your support makes all the difference for us to keep creating these stories." Tiana's dark brown eyes moved slowly from the bag on the ground up to the man standing at the top of his front steps, arms crossed over his broad chest, the late afternoon light catching the clean lines of his low fade and the unreadable set of his jaw. Terrence did not raise his voice. He never had to. "Use the service entrance next time," he said, his deep brown face carrying no anger, only the particular flatness of a man who has never once been inconvenienced past the point of correction. "People like you always come to the wrong door." He turned and walked back inside before she could speak. What Terrence did not know was that the bag on the concrete contained a sealed envelope addressed to a man whose name required no introduction in 14 countries. He did not know that the girl in the delivery uniform standing at his gate had a father who had not raised his voice in 20 years because he had never needed to. He did not notice her take out her phone. He did not see her photograph Ethan's face, then Dylan's, then Jared's, then Hunter's, methodical, unhurried, one at a time. He did not see her pick up the bag, check that the envelope was still sealed, and walk away without looking back. Terrence had not thrown out a delivery girl. He had handed a daughter a reason to finally make the one call she had spent years refusing to make. And before the sun finished setting on his estate, every wall he had ever built was going to come down without a single sound. The morning arrived the way it always did in Tiana Mitchell's apartment, quietly, without ceremony, through a single window that faced the side of another building. She sat on the edge of her bed, the mattress firm beneath her, the fitted sheet beneath her palms smooth but worn thin in places from use. Her medium deep brown skin caught the narrow strip of early light cutting across the floor, warm and unhurried. She held her coffee with both hands and let the steam rise. This was the part of the day she had built for herself, without help, without exception. She set the mug down and moved through her small space with the kind of ease that comes from knowing every inch of it. She had chosen this apartment the same way she chose everything, deliberately small, deliberately ordinary, deliberately hers. She opened the closet and pulled out her uniform, the branded polo, the cargo trousers, the sensible shoes. She dressed without hesitation. To anyone watching, she was simply a young woman preparing for another shift, a delivery driver with natural curls she pulled back into a rounded puff that sat full and even at the crown of her head, her oval face clean and unhurried, her dark brown eyes steady. She looked at herself in the mirror above the bathroom sink. The symmetry of her face, the soft definition of her jaw, the quiet weight behind her gaze, none of it betrayed her. That was the point. Before she picked up her keys, she reached into the top drawer of her nightstand and checked the phone. Not the work phone. The other one. The one with no apps, no contacts visible, and one number saved under a name that was not a name. She had not called it in 11 months. She pressed the screen dark, tucked it into the interior pocket of her delivery bag, and closed the door behind her. Tiana had spent 3 years building a life that asked nothing of anyone, and she was proud of it. She did not know that by the time her shift ended today, she would have called that number. She did not know that the man on the other end would listen to every word without once raising his voice, set down whatever he was holding, and begin a series of quiet instructions that would reach Terrence's gate before the sun moved another hour across the sky. For now, she was just a girl with a uniform and a route. Unaware that the ordinary morning she was walking into was the last one she would spend invisible. Her route started on the east side of the city and worked its way west, 12 stops on a good day, sometimes 15 if someone called in sick and she picked up the extra work. She did not mind. More stops meant more hours, and more hours meant the kind of tired that let her sleep without thinking too much. She loaded her cart at the dispatch center the same way she did every morning, packages organized by size, heaviest at the bottom, fragile ones on top, route sheet folded twice and tucked into her back pocket. The other drivers talked and laughed near the loading bay. Tiana smiled when someone looked her way and kept moving. She was not unfriendly. She was just focused. The first few stops were apartment buildings, buzzed in, signed off, back in the elevator before anyone had time to ask her name. A dry cleaning bag for a dentist's office on the 4th floor. A set of textbooks for a college student who answered the door in pajamas and did not say thank you. A small box of medication for an older woman who called her sweetheart and offered her a biscuit through the doorway. Tiana took the biscuit. She ate it in the elevator going back down. This was her life. Not glamorous. Not complicated. Hers. She had tried college for a year after high school. She had tried an office job the year after that, answering phones for a property company where her manager talked over her in every meeting. She had tried a few things that did not work and a few things that almost did, and somewhere in the middle of all that trying, she had found the delivery job, and it had fit. No one talked over her. No one expected anything from her beyond showing up on time and getting the package to the door in one piece. She was good at both. Her apartment was 15 minutes from the dispatch center by bus. One room, one window, a kitchen that was really just a counter with 2 burners and a microwave stacked on top of a mini fridge. She had painted the wall above her bed a deep green because she read somewhere that it was a calming color, and it was. She had a plant on the windowsill that she watered every 3 days. It was still alive. She considered that a success. She had not always lived this way. She had grown up in a house where the floors were heated and the security cameras rotated every 45 seconds and men in dark clothing stood at the end of the driveway like furniture that breathed. She had grown up knowing that her father's name opened doors that most people did not even know existed. She had also grown up knowing that the same name had a weight to it that could press a person flat if they let it. So she had left. Quietly, cleanly, at 19. Her father had not stopped her. He had looked at her for a long moment across the dining table, his dark eyes still, his face unreadable, and then he had nodded once. That nod had cost him something. She had never let herself think too hard about what. She had built her small life carefully. She kept it small on purpose. Small things were harder to take away. Terrence had built his estate the way he built everything, with the specific intention of making people feel small before they even reached the door. The gate alone stood 12 feet high, black iron with gold detailing along the top that caught the light in a way that was not accidental. The driveway beyond it was paved in pale marble stone and stretched far enough that visitors had time to reconsider their importance before they arrived at the front steps. The house itself sat at the end of that driveway like a statement, 4 stories of dark stone and glass, wide columns framing the entrance, manicured hedges running the length of the property in perfect straight lines. Everything about it said that the man inside had made decisions, and the decisions had paid off, and he wanted you to know it the moment you looked up. Terrence was 50 years old and carried it the way men carry things they are proud of. His broad frame filled a room without effort. His deep brown skin was even and smooth across the wide structure of his face, his jaw squared, his brow set in a permanent expression that sat somewhere between thinking and deciding. He moved through his home with the slow confidence of a man who had never once been rushed by anyone else's schedule. He had made his money in commercial real estate, buying distressed properties, rebuilding them fast, selling them for margins that made other developers quiet with envy. He was good at it. He knew he was good at it. He did not pretend otherwise. He had 3 cars in the garage, a chef who came 4 mornings a week, and a tailor who kept his measurements on file and sent new pieces without being asked. He did not consider any of this excessive. He considered it the natural result of doing things correctly. Ethan, Dylan, Jared, and Hunter had worked for him for 2 years. They rotated posts across the property, 2 at the gate, 1 at the rear entrance, 1 stationed near the main hallway inside. They were efficient and quiet and did exactly what they were told, which was the only standard Terrence had ever applied to anyone in his employment. He did not ask them for opinions. He did not invite conversation beyond what was necessary. They understood this and stayed within it. What set Terrence apart from other wealthy men was not the money itself. It was the certainty. He had a specific way of seeing the world that had hardened over years of getting what he wanted, a belief, settled deep and unquestioned, that things went the way they went because he had ordered them to. Problems were handled. Messes were cleared. People who did not belong in his space were removed from it. This was not cruelty to him. It was maintenance. He had never been told no by anyone whose no carried any real weight. His lawyers said yes. His contractors said yes. His staff said yes. The city officials who processed his permits said yes, sometimes before he finished asking. After enough years of this, a man stops expecting anything different. He had no reason to believe today would be the day that changed. The estate was the last stop on Tiana's route. She had been on her feet for 6 hours by the time she turned onto the street where it sat. Her shoulders were tired in the quiet, familiar way they got toward the end of a long shift, not painful, just present. She checked the address on her route sheet against the number on the stone pillar at the edge of the property and confirmed she had the right place. She folded the sheet, tucked it back into her pocket, and walked toward the entrance nearest to her. It was a side gate, set into the property wall about 30 feet from the main entrance. There was a call box mounted to the left of it, small and black with a single button. Tiana pressed it and waited. Nothing. She pressed it again, holding it a half-second longer. A faint tone sounded somewhere beyond the wall. She shifted the delivery bag on her shoulder and looked at the package in her hand, a sealed envelope, firm and flat, the kind used for important documents. The name on the label was not Terrence. It was a recipient name she had not thought twice about when she picked it up from dispatch. She had simply been told to deliver it to this address and get a signature. A voice came through the call box, clipped and flat. This is the staff entrance. Main gate is on the other side. I just need a signature, Tiana said. It'll take 30 seconds. The line went quiet. She waited. After a moment, she heard the sound of the main gate opening at the far end of the driveway and assumed she was being let in. She walked toward it, envelope in hand. She was almost at the front steps when Terrence appeared at the top of them. He had come out of the front door the way a man comes out of a room he owns, without hurry, without particular interest, already doing something else in his mind. He had a phone in one hand and was reading something on the screen. He looked up when he heard her shoes on the marble driveway, and his expression shifted in a way that was not anger, exactly. It was closer to inconvenience. You came through the main entrance, he said. The side call box didn't. The side entrance is for deliveries. He said it the way you say something to someone who should already know it. And you scuffed the stone. He nodded once toward the bottom step where the edge of her cart had caught the pale marble and left a faint gray mark. It was small. It would wipe clean in 10 seconds. Tiana looked at it, then back at him. I can get a signature and be out of your way. Terrence looked at her for a moment. Not long. Just long enough to make a decision. Then he looked past her, toward the gate where Ethan and Dylan had appeared without being called. Remove her from the property, he said. His voice was level and completely uninterested. He was already looking back at his phone. And hold whatever she's carrying until I decide if I want a complaint filed. He turned and walked back inside before she could say another word. Ethan reached her first. He was the tallest of the four, broad across the shoulders, his dark brown hair cut close on the sides, his deep-set blue eyes carrying the kind of blankness that came from following orders long enough that thinking stopped feeling necessary. He did not grab her right away. He stepped in front of her, close enough that she had to stop walking, and looked down at her with an expression that was not hostile. It was simply final. "Let's go," he said. Dylan appeared on her left a second later, compact and solid, his hazel eyes moving briefly to the envelope in her hand before moving back to her face. He reached out and took the delivery bag off her shoulder before she had time to respond. Not roughly. Just with the ease of a man who had done something like it before and met no real resistance. "That has a package in it," Tiana said. Neither of them answered. Ethan's hand closed around her left arm and Dylan's around her right, and then they were moving, walking her back down the marble driveway the way you walk someone who is not being given a choice. Her feet moved because the alternative was being dragged. She kept her head up. She did not make a sound. Jared was waiting near the gate. He was the tallest of all four of them, long-limbed and angular, his green-gray eyes flat and forward. When they reached him, he took the delivery bag from Dylan, reached inside without looking, and pulled out the sealed envelope. He held it up briefly, checked the front, then set the bag on the ground just outside the gate and dropped the envelope on top of it. The envelope landed at an angle and slid off onto the concrete. Hunter held the gate open. He was the shortest of the four, built thick through the forearms and chest, his brown eyes moving past Tiana to check the driveway behind her as though making sure the removal was complete. When she was fully outside the property line, he let the gate swing shut. The lock engaged with a clean, heavy click. Tiana stood on the sidewalk and did not move for a moment. She looked at the envelope on the ground. She looked at the bag. Then she looked up at the four men on the other side of the gate, still standing there, watching to make sure she left. She reached into her pocket and took out her phone. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. Not concern. Just attention. She photographed him first. Straight on, unhurried, the way you photograph something you want to remember accurately. Then Dylan. Then Jared. Then Hunter. Each one in turn, the phone steady in her hand, her face giving nothing away. None of them moved to stop her. They were outside their authority now, and some part of each of them seemed to understand that what she was doing was not a threat they recognized in time to respond to. She put the phone back in her pocket. She picked up the envelope and placed it carefully in the bag. She lifted the bag onto her shoulder. Then she reached into the inner pocket, past the work phone, and closed her fingers around the other one. She pressed call before she reached the end of the block. Choi Min-suk was in the middle of a meeting when the phone rang. He was seated at the head of a long table in a room on the 32nd floor of a building that did not have his name on it anywhere, not on the lobby directory, not on the lease agreement, not on any document that a person could find by looking. The room was quiet and well lit, with a view of the city that stretched in every direction. 7 men sat along the sides of the table, each one watching him with the careful attention of people who understood that the wrong response to anything he said could cost them significantly. He had been speaking, low and even, about a supply arrangement that was 3 weeks behind schedule. He did not raise his voice about it. He rarely raised his voice about anything. The men were nodding. When the phone on the table beside his tea lit up with an incoming call, everyone in the room saw the screen at the same time. No one spoke. No one moved. The meeting did not continue. Choi looked at the screen for 1 second. Then he picked up the phone and answered it. "Tiana," he said. His voice was the same as it had been mid-sentence 30 seconds ago. Unhurried. Quiet. The kind of quiet that was not empty but full of something that had been compressed over many years into a very small, very dense space. He listened. He did not say yes or I see or go on. He simply held the phone and let her speak, his dark eyes focused on a point on the table in front of him that had nothing on it. The fine lines around his eyes did not shift. The expression on his oval face, already still, became something beyond still. The 7 men at the table watched him the way you watch a sky that has gone the wrong color. Tiana spoke for less than 2 minutes. When she finished, there was a brief silence. "Are you hurt?" he said. It was not phrased as a question exactly. It was phrased as something that needed a direct answer before anything else could happen. She told him no. "Good," he said. "Go home." He ended the call. He set the phone down beside his tea. He picked up the tea, drank what remained of it in a single slow motion, and placed the cup back in its saucer with a sound so small it was almost nothing. Then he looked up at the man seated immediately to his right, a lean man in a dark suit who had worked for him for 11 years and needed very little instruction to understand what was required. Choi said a name. Just the name. Terrence. Then he said an address. Then he said nothing else. The man to his right was already standing. The 2 men beside him were reaching for their phones. Within 30 seconds, 4 of the 7 people at the table had quietly excused themselves from the room, and the remaining 3 sat without speaking, looking at the surface of the table, understanding that the meeting about the supply arrangement was no longer the most important thing that had happened today. Choi Min-suk folded his hands and looked out at the city. He had not raised his voice once. Terrence was back at his desk by the time the first call came in. It was from Marcus Webb, a property developer out of Chicago who had been his partner on a warehouse conversion project for the past 8 months. They were 3 weeks from closing. The deal was clean, the numbers were settled, and Terrence had already mentally moved the profit into the next project. He answered expecting a scheduling question. "I need to step back from the Linden deal," Marcus said. Terrence sat up slowly. "What does that mean, step back?" "It means I'm out. I'll have my lawyers send the paperwork by end of day." A pause. "Nothing personal, Terrence." The line went dead before he could respond. He held the phone for a moment, looking at it the way you look at something that has behaved in a way that makes no sense. Then he set it down, pulled up his email, and started drafting a message to Marcus's legal team. He was not worried yet. People got cold feet. It happened. There were other partners and other deals, and Marcus had always been the cautious type anyway. The second call came 40 minutes later. This one was from a city contractor named Briggs who supplied materials for 2 of Terrence's active builds. Briggs did not offer an explanation at all. He simply said his company would no longer be fulfilling the current orders and that any deposits paid would be returned within 7 business days. Terrence's voice dropped to a very flat, very controlled register. "You're canceling 2 active contracts." "That's correct," Briggs said. "Based on what?" "I'm not able to get into that." Terrence ended the call himself that time. He stood up from his desk and walked to the window that overlooked the rear garden. The hedges were perfectly straight. The stone paths between them were swept clean. Everything on his property was exactly where he had put it. He focused on that for a moment and told himself that 2 calls in one afternoon did not constitute a pattern. Then his banking app sent a notification. He looked at his phone. The notification said that 2 of his business accounts had been flagged for a routine compliance review and that access to outgoing transfers had been temporarily suspended pending verification. He read it twice. He had never received a message like this before. He called his bank contact directly, a senior manager named Phillips who had handled his accounts for 6 years and always answered within 2 rings. It rang 11 times. No answer. He called Phillips's direct line. Same result. He sent a text. The ticks showed it had been delivered and read. No reply came. Terrence stood in the center of his office and turned the phone over in his hand. The room was the same as it always was, dark wood, clean surfaces, the faint hum of the climate system keeping everything at exactly the right temperature. Nothing had changed in here. He could see that clearly. But something outside these walls had shifted in a way he could not yet locate, and the part of him that had built an empire on reading situations correctly was sending a signal he did not yet have the information to name. He told himself it was coincidence. He almost believed it. The intercom at the main gate sounded at 4:15. Terrence was still at his desk, his third unanswered call of the last hour sitting in his recent log like an accusation. He looked at the small security monitor on the corner of his desk that fed from the front gate camera. A man stood on the other side of it. He was not what Terrence expected. The man was older, somewhere in his late 50s, lean and narrow through the frame, his posture so controlled it looked like something he had practiced until it became permanent. He was wearing a plain dark jacket over a light shirt, no tie, nothing about his clothing that announced anything. His hair was black with gray at the temples, combed neatly back from a face that carried its age in fine lines around the eyes and along the sides of his mouth. He was not tall. He was not visibly armed. He was standing at the gate with his hands at his sides, looking directly at the camera with dark, quiet eyes, as though he had all the time available to him and was simply choosing to spend some of it here. Terrence pressed the intercom. "Who are you?" "My name is Choi," the man said. His voice came through the speaker at a volume that was just below comfortable, the kind of volume that made you lean slightly toward the source. "I would like to speak with you about something that happened on your property this afternoon." Terrence almost sent him away. The instinct was there, immediate and familiar. But something about the stillness of the man on the other side of the gate, the way he had not shifted his weight, had not looked away from the camera, had not added anything unnecessary to his sentence, made Terrence press the gate release instead. He met him at the front steps. Choi walked up the marble driveway slowly, not because he was uncertain of his pace but because slow, in this case, was deliberate. He looked at the estate the way you look at something you are calculating rather than admiring. When he reached the base of the steps, he stopped and looked up at Terrence with an expression that was entirely neutral. "You had a delivery today," Choi said. Still that same low volume. "A young woman. Uniform. Natural hair. She came to your side entrance." Terrence felt something tighten across his shoulders. "I had a trespasser who couldn't follow basic." "She is my daughter," Choi said. He did not say it as an interruption exactly. He said it the way you place something on a table that you want the other person to look at carefully before anyone says anything else. The words landed and sat there. Terrence looked at him. At the plain jacket. At the unrushed hands. At the face that had not changed expression since he walked through the gate. "Your men put their hands on her," Choi continued, his dark eyes steady on Terrence's face. "They threw her belongings onto a public street. And you gave the order." He paused. "I am not here to argue about whether she used the correct entrance," he said. "I am here because I want you to understand exactly what you did this afternoon and who you did it to." He held Terrence's gaze and did not look away. "So, let us talk." Terrence had invited him inside without fully deciding to. That was the part he could not explain to himself afterward, how the conversation had moved from the front steps to the interior hallway without him making a clear choice to allow it. Choi had simply continued speaking, and Terrence had continued listening, and at some point they were standing inside the entrance of the estate with the door closed behind them and the 4 bodyguards stationed at a distance that suddenly felt less useful than it had that morning. Choi did not look at the house. He kept his eyes on Terrence. "Ethan," he said. "Dylan. Jared. Hunter." He said each name without pausing, without referring to anything written down. Ethan took her left arm. Dylan took her right. Jared removed her bag and emptied it onto the street. Hunter held the gate. Another pause. You watched from the top of these steps and told her that people like her always come to the wrong door. Terrence said nothing. I want to be precise, Choi continued, because precision matters to me. She was not trespassing. She had a delivery assigned to this address through a licensed service. She rang the entrance closest to her because the layout of your property is not marked clearly from the street. The scuff she left on your step measures approximately 4 centimeters and will clean off with a damp cloth. He said this without sarcasm, without any change in the quietness of his voice. He was simply accounting for facts. None of what happened to her was proportionate to any of that. Terrence found his voice somewhere. I didn't know who she was. No, Choi said. You did not. He let that sit for a moment. But I want you to understand something clearly. The question of who she is has no bearing on whether what happened to her was acceptable. It was not acceptable because she is a person. The fact that she is also my daughter is relevant only to what happens next. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a small photograph. He placed it on the hall table beside him without looking at it. It was a photo of the sealed envelope, taken from above, the recipient name visible on the label. The package she was carrying, Choi said, was addressed to me. Which means your men held my correspondence on your instruction. That is a separate matter. I will address it separately. Terrence looked at the photograph. Then back at Choi. As of approximately 2 hours ago, Choi said, your Linden Street project has no partner. Your material supply for the Archer and Connell builds has been cancelled. Your primary business accounts are under a hold that will not be lifted through normal channels because the people who would lift it are no longer taking your calls. He paused. I am not telling you this as a warning. I am telling you this because it has already happened and I believe you deserve to know the reason. He picked the photograph back up and returned it to his pocket. You looked at my daughter, he said, and saw someone who could be discarded without cost. His dark eyes settled on Terrence's face one final time. I have spent the last several hours correcting that assumption. He buttoned the single button on his jacket. We are finished here, he said. Tiana was standing on the pavement outside the estate when the main gate opened. She had not planned to come back. She had gone home the way her father told her to, changed out of her uniform, sat on the edge of her bed for a while looking at the green wall without really seeing it. But somewhere in the stillness of her small apartment, with the work phone on the counter and the other one quiet in her pocket, she had picked up her keys and come back anyway. She was not sure what she had expected to find. She only knew she needed to see it. The street was calm. The iron gate stood open, both panels pushed wide in a way she had not seen when she was here before. The marble driveway stretched beyond it toward the front steps, which were empty. The estate looked exactly as it had that afternoon, the same columns, the same hedges, the same pale stone, but something about it felt different now in a way she could not name precisely. Smaller, maybe. Or just less certain of itself. She heard the front door close. Choi Min-suk came down the steps at the same unhurried pace he did everything. He walked the length of the driveway without looking back at the house, through the open gate, and stopped when he reached her. He looked at her for a moment, her face, her eyes, the delivery bag still on her shoulder because she had not thought to leave it at home. You are not hurt, he said. I told you that on the phone, she said. I know, he said. I wanted to see it. They stood there on the pavement outside the gate that had been shut in her face 6 hours ago. The evening had settled into the kind of quiet that comes after the city finishes its busiest part of the day. A bus passed at the far end of the street. Someone's window was lit up orange 2 buildings down. Tiana looked at the gate. Then at him. I didn't call you so you would do all of that, she said. I know, he said again. I called you because, she stopped. She looked down at the strap of her bag and straightened it on her shoulder, buying herself a second. I don't know exactly why I called. Yes you do, he said. He said it gently, without pressure, the way you say something true to someone who already knows it and just needs a moment to let it settle. She did not answer that. But she did not argue with it either. He took a single step to the side so that he was standing beside her rather than in front of her, both of them facing the same direction, the open gate just ahead. He did not put his arm around her. He did not try to take the bag. He simply stood there, close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him, and waited. Tiana looked at the gate one last time. She had spent 3 years making herself small enough that no one would feel the need to move her. She had been moved anyway. And she had called the one person she swore she would never need. She exhaled. Then she stepped away from the gate, and he walked beside her, and she did not create any distance between them. For the first time, she let him stay there. And that is where we leave them. Tiana Mitchell, still in her everyday clothes, walking away from a gate that had been shut in her face hours before. Choi Min-suk beside her, not in front of her, not pulling her along, just there, steady and present, the way he had always been even when she refused to let him show it. And behind them, an estate that looked exactly the same as it always had, except that everything inside it had already come apart. Terrence had built his world on the belief that power announced itself loudly and that people without loud announcements could be dismissed without cost. He had been wrong about both. Some lessons arrive as warnings. Others arrive after the fact, when there is nothing left to protect. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please give it a thumbs up. It helps more people find stories like this one. And if you are new here, welcome. This is Arden Tells Tales, and this is what we do. We tell stories about quiet strength and hidden power, about the people the world underestimates and the moments that prove the world wrong. Every single week we bring you new stories just like this one, and we have so many more coming that we think you are going to love. So make sure you subscribe to the channel right now and turn on all notifications so you never miss an upload. It takes 2 seconds and it makes an enormous difference to us. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought of Tiana and her father. Tell us where you are watching from. We read every single comment and we love hearing from you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. And we will see you in the next story. This is Arden Tells Tales. We will be here when you come back.